My name is Madeline Parker, and that night, when I returned to my apartment after a 12-hour hospital shift, I saw police officers waiting at my door, holding a seizure order with the owner's name written as my mother's. The house, the car, even the bank account. Everything had been transferred into her name, and I had suddenly become invisible in my own life. Have you ever been betrayed by family to the point where you no longer know what home means? I will tell you everything, because sometimes the deepest wound doesn't come from outsiders but from your own mother's hand. And if my story touches you, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to walk this path with me, because what happened afterward was far more ruthless and unexpected. I froze at the apartment doorway, damp with the smell of rain, clutching that cold piece of paper bearing my name yet no longer belonging to me. At that moment, memories rushed back like an old film running in reverse. I remembered my childhood years in the red brick house on the outskirts of Boston, where every dinner felt like a tense meeting, where success was strictly defined by my parents, and especially by my mother. My mother, Victoria Parker, outwardly a respected teacher at a prestigious high school, was often praised by parents and admired by colleagues. But behind closed doors, she was the one who decided everything, from what we ate to what future each child would have. My father, a diligent surgeon, remained silent, letting her dictate. He rarely objected, as if her control were the natural order of things. My older sister, Hannah, had always been the pride of the family. Every award of hers was displayed on the living room shelf: debate trophies, piano cups, certificates for excellence. I had my own achievements, but they were usually tucked away somewhere, as if unworthy of display. Whenever guests visited, my mother would proudly lead them to the shelf, pointing at Hannah's photo in her prestigious school uniform. "My eldest daughter, she'll surely become a famous lawyer." About me, she would only nod briefly. "Madeline is obedient too, but a bit too dreamy." I wasn't just dreaming. I loved to explore, to take apart old radios and turn them into toy medical kits, fascinated with the medical journals my father left on his desk. But to my mother, difference had no value. She only wanted me to walk the same straight, predictable path Hannah had taken. Smooth, risk-free, without deviation. I'll never forget being 15. I had been awarded a summer scholarship at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, an opportunity my science teacher said could change my entire future. I ran home with the acceptance letter, eager to show my mother. She glanced at it, her lips tightening, then tore it in half before my eyes. "You don't need to waste time there," she said coldly. "You'll take piano lessons this summer like Hannah. Don't make things messy." I still hear the sound of that tearing paper, like the snap of fragile trust between us. My father stood in the kitchen doorway, silent as always. I looked at him, waiting for protest, some defense. But he only bent to pick up his coffee cup, pretending he hadn't heard. From that moment, I understood. In this family, silence was another form of complicity. Dinner at the Parker household felt like interrogation. "How are your grades? Have you applied to the honors program? What's your career plan?" Hannah always had perfect answers. Whenever mine deviated, my mother's eyes darkened. "Madeline, you need to be more realistic. Stop chasing fanciful ideas. Look at your sister and learn." Once, I proposed a science fair project. Not the usual volcano but a solar water purification system. I presented it eagerly, thinking this time they'd be proud. My mother only frowned, and my father gave a half-smile. Sometimes the safe path is best. Look at Hannah. She follows the instructions and always succeeds. I sat in silence, feeling the world I was building collapse inside. Through high school, I tried to balance pleasing my mother and keeping some freedom. I joined the school's science research team but was also forced to keep piano lessons, even though every note felt lifeless under my fingers. When my mother sat beside me, making me repeat the same piece 10 times, I felt like I was living out her dream, not mine. Hannah only shone brighter. She entered Yale while I was admitted to Stanford. Friends congratulated me, but my mother sighed. Stanford is fine, but if you'd studied medicine like your father, it would be more secure. Biotechnology sounds unstable. I smiled, hiding my pride, knowing that no matter what I achieved, she would always find a way to diminish it. Those comparisons clung to me like a shadow. They weren't casual words. They became the definition relatives used for me. At family gatherings, people marveled at Hannah's progress, and when they mentioned me, they chuckled. Madeline's fine too, creative but a little odd. I've often wondered, how can a mother pour all her pride into one child and leave the other in the shadows? That question still echoed in my mind as I stood before the seized apartment door. My pain wasn't just about material loss. It was years of denial, comparison, and being pushed aside in my own family. That paper was only the culmination of a long process my mother had set in motion since I was a child. She didn't just want me to follow her path. She wanted me never to walk on my own. Maybe you've lived through something similar, forced to be someone's replica, compared endlessly within your own home. If you've ever been compared to a sibling, share it below because this story touches my deepest wound. And I knew, the confrontation between my mother and me had never truly begun. Not until the moment I lost everything. I still remember leaving Boston to start my adult life. With my Stanford diploma in hand, I thought at last I could prove I wasn't the useless dreamer she claimed. I landed a high-paying job at a respected medical tech company in California. The name was prestigious enough for my mother to brag at parties. She often repeated, almost to reassure herself, "At least she's found a decent job like people expect." Whenever she called, she never asked if I was happy, if I found passion in my work. She only asked about salary, benefits, and whether I planned to buy a house within 2 years. "Hannah already bought her downtown condo, Madeline," she'd add lightly, but heavy enough to weigh me down. My job was stable, but emptiness gnawed at me. I worked on hospital data management software, yet when I spoke directly with patients and doctors, I saw a painful truth. Those with rare diseases were left behind. Families spent months, even years, trying to find the right specialists or clinical trials. I once watched an 8-year-old boy's hopeful eyes dim as his family failed to find the right trial in time. That image haunted my sleepless nights. An idea began forming. An AI platform to connect rare disease patients quickly and precisely to doctors and trials, saving lives. The thought burned within me, but whenever I shared it with family, I received only scoffs. One evening at home after dinner, I gathered courage. "I'm seriously thinking about leaving my job to start a company. I want to build a platform for rare disease patients." The table fell silent. My mother set her wine glass down, eyes narrowing. "Madeline, you have a stable job with high pay and great benefits. Do you know how many people dream of that? Don't tell me you'd throw it away for a fanciful idea." My father, as usual, quietly served himself more food. Hannah laughed softly. "Sounds nice, but Madeline, does your company even offer health insurance? Without that, no one will last." Heat rose in my cheeks. I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. "I've researched this, Mom. This isn't fantasy. It's a chance to change how healthcare works." She shook her head as if I'd said the most foolish thing. "A chance? I've taught all my life and I know reality. Dreamers end in failure. Look at your sister. Follow the safe, secure path. What you're talking about only earns pity." I said no more. That night, in my childhood bedroom with its water-stained ceiling, I promised myself I would do it, no matter what. And so Medilink was born in a rented San Jose room. Naomi, a talented programmer I once worked with, and I coded day and night, often sleeping in our chairs. My savings dwindled. Each time exhaustion hit, we reminded ourselves of the patients we might save. At first, my mother seemed supportive. She came to Medilink's small launch, smiled for photos, then suddenly handed me legal documents, calling them authorization papers to help manage finances. Too naive, I believed her. I signed without reading. I had no idea I'd just handed away control of my future. Months later, when Medilink needed funds, I turned to her. She wrote a check but said coldly, "This is an investment, not a gift. I want a clear financial plan, and you must commit to repayment." I felt like a stranger borrowing from a bank, not a daughter receiving help. At first, Ethan, my boyfriend then an investment banker, was intrigued by my venture. He'd introduce me at parties. "My girlfriend's a tech founder. She might be the next big name." I smiled, clinging to his encouragement. But his excitement faded when Medilink didn't produce miracles quickly enough. Arguments grew frequent. "I thought you'd have a big success by now," he sighed. "Instead, you're throwing your career away." I stayed silent, but loneliness deepened. I realized even the one I trusted most was leaving me behind. The only comfort came from trial patients. One boy was successfully connected to a clinical study. His family would never have found otherwise. His mother called me in tears. "Thank you, Madeline. You gave my son a chance at life." That moment convinced me I was on the right path. But to my mother, it was still illusion. One night she called, "You still think Medilink has value? You're wasting other people's money and time. If you're smart, you'll stop now." I answered, my voice trembling but firm. "You may not believe, but I do. And I'll keep going." When I hung up, my hands still shook, but a fire burned inside. Even if the world turned away, I could not give up. What I didn't know was that my mother had already prepared a larger trap. The papers I signed earlier, the help she offered, were only the opening moves in a long plan to strip everything from me. Have you ever trusted a family member so deeply you handed them the keys to your life, only to realize one day they were shackles? If you've ever been exploited by someone you trusted, leave a comment, because I'm about to share the price I paid for my naivete. That evening, I received a formal invitation from my mother. Thick card, gold border, embossed letters. Celebrating Victoria Parker's 30 years of service. Fairmont Hotel. I read it again and again, puzzled why she'd invite me, since her showcases usually revolved around Hannah. But I decided to go, partly to save family face, partly hoping to prove to her that I was no longer the weak child she thought. The Fairmont Hotel glowed under dazzling lights. The ballroom sparkled, tables draped in pure white linens, crystal glasses glittering. I walked in, clutching my old handbag, silently knowing every gaze in the room was on my mother and Hannah. Indeed, on the stage, a giant screen showed Hannah receiving an award from the Boston Bar Association. Applause thundered, while I quietly searched for a corner seat. When the program paused, my mother stepped up to the podium, silver hair neatly pinned, her smile full of authority. Her voice rang out, firm and steady. "I want to thank my family, especially my 2 daughters. Hannah, the pride of my life, who just won a $10 million case. And Madeline." I looked up suddenly, heart pounding. Maybe, just this once, she would recognize my effort. Madeline is still experimenting with her little company. But honestly, she's still nothing but a burden. Laughter erupted across the room. It wasn't cruel, but more like an echo to her mockery. It felt like a bucket of ice water poured over me. My face burned, my ears rang, yet my mother hadn't finished. Truth be told, Medilink isn't worth a cent. I tried to help, even managed its finances, but it went nowhere. And you know what? All the legal documents, even the company ownership, are under my name. Whispers swept through the room. Someone even whistled mockingly. Hannah sipped her wine, eyes narrowing slightly, but said nothing. The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. I wanted to shout back that she was lying, but deep down I knew part of it was true. The papers I had signed had given her power I never anticipated. A man at the next table leaned toward his wife and muttered, "What a shame. Thought she was smart. Turns out she's just a pawn in her mother's hands." I heard every word, my heart squeezed tight. I shot to my feet. The chair screeched against the polished floor. "Mother, why would you do this?" The ballroom went silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to me. My mother smiled, as if she had long awaited this moment. "Madeline, you've always been too sensitive. I'm only telling the truth. Without me, MediLink wouldn't even exist." I trembled, my voice cracking. "That's not true. Naomi and I built MediLink line by line of code. You never believed in me, so why are you claiming the credit now?" My mother tilted her chin, her eyes sharp as blades. "Credit? Sweetheart, everything requires legality. And legally, that company belongs to me." Laughter roared again, sharper this time. I looked around, some pitied, some shook their heads, but no one defended me. Not even my father, seated in the front row, who bowed his head in silence. In that moment, I felt like the 15-year-old girl again, when my MIT scholarship letter was torn in half by her hands. The same helplessness, the same complicit silence. But this time, an entire glittering ballroom bore witness. Finally, Hannah spoke, her voice calm but dripping with sarcasm. "Madeline, don't be so dramatic. Maybe Mom and I just want you to think more realistically. A company without health insurance for its employees won't survive." I turned to her, searching her eyes. For a flicker there was guilt, but it quickly vanished behind her flawless mask. I had no strength left to argue. I walked out, leaving behind the hum of laughter. My breath came ragged, each step heavier than stone, my chest torn apart. Naomi called just as I stood under the hotel's awning. "Madeline, are you okay?" I choked. My mother just humiliated me publicly. In front of everyone, she said MediLink was worthless and declared it hers. There was silence for a few seconds, then Naomi whispered, "I think she's planning something. I just found a strange email from her account. Looks like she's in talks with a major pharmaceutical corporation." Froze. "You mean she plans to sell MediLink? Not just sell it, as if it were her invention?" "Madeline, I'm afraid she's been planning this for a long time." Cold wind lashed my face. Suddenly, it all became clear. The papers I signed, the investments she offered, all part of a long game to make me an outsider in my own company. In the hotel's pale yellow light, I drew a deep breath. I knew from that moment, the real battle had begun. Have you ever been turned into a laughingstock by your own family? Humiliated so badly you wanted to disappear on the spot? Hit like if you believe no one deserves to be shamed by their own mother, because this was only the beginning. After that party, I returned to MediLink's office, my eyes red from sleeplessness. The cramped room we rented as both workspace and home was as cluttered as always. Empty coffee cups on desks, computers buzzing all night, and the whiteboard scrawled with algorithm diagrams. Naomi was curled up on the old sofa. Thin blanket slipped to the floor. I gently shook her awake, voice breaking. "Naomi, my mother just publicly claimed the company as hers. In front of hundreds of people." Naomi rubbed her eyes, staring at me, anger and worry mixed in her gaze. "I know. And I'm afraid that's just the tip of the iceberg, Madeline." She pointed to the open laptop screen. A string of emails appeared, pulled from the system. I recognized my mother's address. The message was short but clear. She was negotiating with a major pharmaceutical giant, offering to transfer complete ownership of the patient connection algorithm, for a price undisclosed. I collapsed into the chair, my hands ice cold. So it's true. She intends to sell MediLink as if it were hers. Naomi gripped my shoulder tightly. "But we won't let her. No matter what, MediLink is our blood, our tears." The days that followed, we worked like fevered souls. By day, keeping the company alive. By night, combing through every document, gathering proof that I was the rightful founder. But obstacles piled high. The company account was nearly drained. My mother had pulled all her so-called investment. We survived on instant noodles, sometimes barely scraping enough for electricity. I remember one day, Naomi found an unpaid bill stuck to the office door. She quietly tore it down, tossed it in the trash, and said half-jokingly, "Maybe we should get used to working in the dark. I likes it that way." I laughed through tears. That fragile optimism was all we had left. Then one night, as I typed lines of code, the door swung open. Ethan, my ex-boyfriend, stood there in his sharp suit, hair slicked back, his familiar cologne filling the tiny room. "Madeline, I need to talk." My chest tightened. "Why are you here?" He hesitated, then said, "You deserve to know the truth. Your mother came to me once. She offered to invest in my career if I left you." I went numb. My vague suspicions now confirmed. "And you agreed?" Ethan lowered his head. "I thought it was the right choice. You were too much of a dreamer, and I needed stability. But now, seeing you like this, I realize I was wrong." Naomi crossed her arms, eyes full of contempt. "Convenient realization after you already got everything you wanted." Ethan opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "Thanks for the honesty. But I don't care anymore. You can leave." He faltered, then turned and left, his cologne fading into the suffocating air. I sank into the chair, tears streaming, yet my heart clearer than ever. I had lost love to my mother's hand, but I couldn't lose my life's work too. The very next day, Naomi opened an email. One of our long-awaited investors had officially pulled out. Reason: uncertain company ownership, unsafe to invest. My grip tightened around the phone, blood rushing in my ears. I didn't need to think. It was my mother spreading rumors to strangle Medilink. We called an emergency meeting. 5 of us sat around the wobbly table, faces gaunt, weary. I looked at them, the weight pressing down. "If anyone wants to leave, I'll understand. I can't promise we'll survive this." A young programmer, Matt, lifted his head. "I still believe Medilink can save thousands of lives. If I quit now, I'll regret it forever." Naomi nodded. "We've come too far to turn back." In that moment, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. That night, after everyone left, Naomi handed me a file. "Madeline, you need to see this." Inside was a copy of the very first investment contract my mother had me sign. Naomi had retrieved it from storage. The signatures, the clauses, all bore marks of coercion and manipulation. I trembled, remembering that afternoon at 15 when my mother forced me to sign a thick stack of papers, saying it was to keep your future safe. I hadn't understood, only obeyed out of fear. Now it was a weapon against me, but also proof. She had exploited my youth to seize control. In the silence of that room, I whispered, more to myself than anyone, "She can take my money, my reputation, even my love. But she will never take the truth." Naomi laid a steady hand on my shoulder. "Then we fight. With everything we've got." The months that followed, Medilink barely survived. We slashed every cost, worked until dawn, sometimes sleeping on cardboard sheets on the floor. Some nights I woke in a sweat, hearing rain hammering the window, terrified tomorrow would be the end. But in that darkness, small lights flickered. A patient connected to a trial sent me a photo of his smiling child, 4-line in his arm. A doctor emailed thanks for cutting months of waiting. Those moments kept me standing. Still, my mother didn't stop. Rumors of Medilink's legal instability spread. Investor calls dwindled. I felt like I was running down a slippery slope, moments from falling. And just when despair nearly consumed me, Naomi pushed the laptop toward me. "Madeline, you need to see this." On the screen was a chain of newly leaked emails, not just between my mother and that pharmaceutical corporation, but including draft terms, Transfer of the Medilink algorithm for $50 million. Condition: all ownership must be under the name Victoria Parker. I stared at the number, my heart tightening. All our sweat, tears, and sacrifice, priced and listed like merchandise. The night wind rushed through the window, sending a paper from the desk fluttering to the floor. I picked it up, clenched it in my hand, feeling pain turn into resolve. I sat for hours before the computer screen, eyes locked on the leaked contract. Those cold words cut into my mind like knives. Transfer of the entire Medilink algorithm. Seller, Victoria Parker. The draft signature at the bottom felt like pure humiliation. I had already lost love, lost my family's trust, and now I was about to lose the very creation I had built. Naomi came over, laid a hand on my shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "Madeline, we can't stay silent anymore. There has to be a way to fight back." I sighed, exhausted. "But she holds all the legal documents. Every piece of evidence is against us." Naomi shook her head, her eyes bright. "Not all of it. Do you remember your father kept that box of old files? There might be something in there." The thought made my heart race. My father, the man who had stayed silent his whole life, might hold the key. The next day, I went to the hospital where he worked. He was in the duty room, still looking stern, his hair more gray than before. When he saw me, he looked surprised but didn't ask questions, only gestured for me to sit. "What do you want, Madeline?" he began, his deep voice tinged with unease. I looked straight into his eyes. "Dad, I know Mom forged documents when I was underage. I need the truth. Do you have the originals?" He was silent for so long I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out an old USB stick, and set it before me. "I never agreed with what your mother did. But I didn't have the courage to oppose her. This is everything. Use it wisely." My hands trembled as I took it, torn between gratitude and bitterness. "Dad, why didn't you protect me all these years?" His eyes were heavy with sorrow. "I was weak, Madeline. Sorry." On the way back, I gripped the USB like it was my lifeline. Naomi and I opened it, and just as we hoped, scanned copies of the original contracts. My 15-year-old handwriting was clear, next to my fingerprint. Under witness, my mother's signature. But the most crucial detail, the signing date was completely invalid. I hadn't been old enough to hold legal responsibility. Naomi nearly shouted, "This is golden evidence. The contract is void." I stared at the screen, my eyes blurring. My childhood flooded back. The times I was forced to sign papers, threatened that if I disobeyed, I'd disappoint my parents. I saw little Madeline again, trembling as she held a pen, unaware she was being stripped of freedom before she even had a chance to grow up. That night I didn't sleep. I sat alone in the office, the lamp casting shadows across the wall. One question circled in my mind. Am I strong enough to fight my own mother? But then I remembered the faces of patients Medilink had helped, remembered a handwritten letter from a mother thanking us for giving her daughter a chance to live. They gave me strength. The next morning, Naomi placed coffee firmly on the desk. "Madeline, we need witnesses. Not just the contract, someone has to speak the truth." I froze, then thought of Ethan. He had admitted my mother bribed him. As much as I despised him, his testimony could change everything. We met him in a small cafe downtown. When he saw me, he looked uneasy. "I know you despise me. But if you need me, I'll tell the truth." I looked at him, my voice cold but steady. "This isn't about you and me anymore. This is about justice. If you speak the truth, that's the only way you can make amends." He nodded. In his eyes, for a moment, I glimpsed the man I once loved. But it was too late. Leaving the cafe, Naomi whispered, "Madeline, we have it all now. The original contract, a witness, and data proving Medilink was built by us." I gripped her hand, hope stirring inside me. But I also knew facing my mother head-on wouldn't be easy. Victoria Parker was a woman of influence, with a vast network. She wouldn't surrender easily. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting the first legal complaint against my own mother. Each keystroke was like cutting away years of chains. I was no longer the girl forced to sign papers. I was Madeline Parker, founder of MediLink. Naomi sat beside me, whispering with quiet resolve, "We'll bring her into the light." I lifted my eyes, tears shining but filled with fire. Yes. This isn't just a battle to save MediLink. This is a battle to reclaim my life. And in that moment I knew the road ahead would be stormy. But this time I had the truth in my hands and allies by my side. I would never run again. Share this video to remind others. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those closest to us. The first trial opened on a freezing March morning, the Boston sky gray as if it too wanted to drown me in dread. I stepped into the courthouse with trembling legs, but my heart burned with determination. Naomi walked beside me, clutching the case file like an irreplaceable ally. My father was there too, sitting in the back row, face tense, frail hands clasped together. Across the aisle my mother, Victoria, appeared in an elegant black dress, her stride full of confidence. Hannah walked beside her, carrying a leather case, eyes cold as they met mine. The image struck me. I wasn't just facing my mother, but an entire alliance she had built. When the trial began, my mother's lawyer quickly erected a wall of arguments. Mrs. Victoria Parker only acted to protect her daughter from failure. All investments were transparent. The contract bears Madeline's signature and fingerprint. This is undeniable proof. I sat frozen as the contract was projected onto the screen. My childish handwriting, shaky lines of a 15-year-old, stared back at me. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply. My lawyer, a middle-aged woman named Clara, rose, her voice firm. "Yes, Your Honor, the contract bears Madeline's signature." But at the time she was 15. Under Massachusetts law, any contract signed by a minor without a legal guardian's witness is void. And we have evidence that Mrs. Victoria coerced and even threatened her daughter into signing. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I looked at my mother, saw the corner of her mouth twitch into a mocking smirk, as if every accusation were just buzzing flies. When it came to witnesses, Clara called Ethan. He entered, face tense. I felt every eye on him. His voice shook at first, then grew steady. I was Madeline's boyfriend. Mrs. Victoria approached me, promised to support my career if I left her. She told me directly that MediLink had no future, and if I wanted safety, I should walk away. Murmurs spread across the courtroom. I saw Hannah's face pale, while my mother clenched her jaw, hands gripping the chair. Her lawyer quickly retorted, "That's hearsay with no concrete proof." Ethan lifted his head, voice firm. "I know my words may be doubted, but I'm here to redeem myself. I lost a courageous woman because I obeyed manipulation, and I won't let anyone else suffer the same." I looked at him, emotions tangled, but I knew his testimony was vital. Then it was my turn. At Clara's nod, I walked to the stand. Silence fell. I gripped the microphone, my voice hoarse with emotion. MediLink is my life. It was born from sleepless nights, tears, and personal sacrifice. I'm not a naive child anymore. I know the law, and I know the pain of being turned into an outsider in my own dream. I'm not seeking pity. I'm seeking justice. As I spoke, I saw my father lower his head, shoulders trembling. My mother, meanwhile, stared coldly, as if my words were nothing but theater. Then, her lawyer suddenly produced a new financial report, showing MediLink in heavy losses and unsustainable. My breath caught. It was false data. Clearly, my mother had fabricated it. Naomi leapt up, handing Clara another file. Clara presented it swiftly. These are the original internal records from Medilink's system, verified electronically. They prove the company is improving its algorithm and already achieving results in connecting patients. That report is falsified. The courtroom tensed. The judge frowned, ordering an immediate forensic review. My mother suddenly stood, her voice cutting like ice. Enough! Madeline always thinks she's the victim. In truth, she's never been grateful. Without me, she wouldn't have had a dime to start. I looked at her, no longer afraid. My voice dropped, steady and sharp. You never wanted me to succeed. You only wanted me under your shadow forever. The room fell silent. I saw Hannah's eyes flicker, torn between loyalty and doubt. The judge struck the gavel, pausing proceedings for document review. Naomi and I stepped into the hallway, hearts pounding. My father approached, voice trembling. My daughter. Sorry. I should have told the truth sooner. I looked at him, choked. You may have been silent too long. But now you still have the chance to stand with me. He nodded, eyes red. That day, I understood this battle wasn't only in the courtroom. It was in every gaze, every family bond, in silence, and in courage. I had stepped onto a battlefield, not just to defend Medilink, but to reclaim the right to live as myself. And I knew the hardest was yet to come. On the third trial day, I entered with a heart heavy but resolute. The courtroom overflowed with reporters and spectators. Since news of the lawsuit between my mother and me leaked, the public eye had turned to Medilink. I sat down at the plaintiff's table, telling myself that today could mark the turning point, not just for the company but for my entire life. The air in the courtroom was already tense, but suddenly it erupted when a court clerk rushed in, handing a thick envelope to the judge. He opened it, frowned as he skimmed a few lines, then looked up. We've just received urgent information. The Wall Street Journal reports. Global pharmaceutical giant Pharmatica is in the final stage of valuing and negotiating the acquisition of Medilink. Estimated worth $2 billion. The courtroom froze for several seconds, then immediately filled with loud whispers. My head spun, my heart pounding. I knew we had held a few preliminary talks with Pharmatica, but I never thought things had gone this far, let alone that the news would break at this exact moment. I looked at my mother. Her face had gone pale, lips pressed tight. Her eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for an escape. Hannah stared wide-eyed, dropping the pen from her hand. My mother's lawyer jumped up, trying to hide his unease. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a media rumor. We cannot base judgment on that. Clara, my attorney, calmly raised her hand. Your Honor, we've already contacted Pharmatica directly to verify. And here, an official email from the Vice President of Global Strategy. They confirm that Medilink's technology has just passed a critical trial threshold, and they believe this algorithm could transform the entire rare patient enrollment process. This is not rumor. This is fact. The courtroom buzzed again. Camera flashes went off non-stop. I saw my mother grinding her teeth, her knuckles white from gripping the armrest. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order, then fixed his gaze on her. Mrs. Victoria Parker, do you deny that you've been attempting to transfer Medilink's technology to another corporation? She took a deep breath, then suddenly let out a bitter laugh. Yes, I'm negotiating. And that's the smartest move. A fledgling company drowning in losses has finally found a buyer. Instead of calling it betrayal, Madeline should be grateful I've brought real value. I rose to my feet, blood boiling, my voice echoing through the courtroom, shaking but steady. No, you're wrong. Pharmatica is interested in Medilink not because of you, but because of the algorithm my team and I built day and night. That work created the value. You're just trying to turn it into your personal bargaining chip for money. In that moment, I caught Hannah's eyes. She no longer held her usual composure. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. The trial pressed on with wave after wave of evidence. Clara presented data proving the algorithm had reached 95% accuracy, congratulatory emails from doctors in the trial, and even testimony from patients saved by the platform. Each piece was an arrow piercing the wall my mother had built. When Ethan was called again to testify, he described in detail his meeting with her at an upscale restaurant last year, when she laid a short contract and a large check in front of him in exchange for leaving me. His voice cracked. I signed. And it was the worst mistake of my life. The courtroom fell silent. I saw my mother's eyes falter, then she suddenly leapt up, pointing at me. She always plays the victim. You don't understand. I only wanted what's best for her. Without me, she'd never have survived in this brutal world. The judge cut her off sternly. This is not a place for emotional justifications. We are addressing forgery and misappropriation. She collapsed back into her chair, her face blank with shock. And for the first time I wasn't afraid. I knew she was finally revealing her true self. Outside in the hallway afterward, reporters swarmed, questions firing at me. Madeline, what do you think of MediLink being valued at $2 billion? Will you forgive your mother? Will you sell MediLink to PharMedica? I answered simply. MediLink was created to save lives, not to be a pawn in a power game. I'll protect it with everything I have. As the crowd thinned, Hannah approached, her face solemn. Madeline, I need to talk. I looked at her warily. About what? To defend Mom one more time. She shook her head, her eyes glistening. No. This time is different. I was wrong to stand with her. But now, seeing her exposed, I can't stay silent. If you need me, I'll testify. Froze. For years, Hannah had always been the star in our mother's eyes, while I was only a shadow. And now, she was willing to stand beside me. Softly I asked, why? She inhaled deeply, her voice breaking. Because I realize if we keep letting her control us, we'll both lose everything. And because I owe you one time to stand for the truth. I looked into her eyes and saw no cold pride, only honesty. A late honesty but necessary. That night, back at the office, I sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the news about MediLink flooded every channel. Young U.S. health startup set to be acquired for $2 billion. My phone buzzed non-stop. Congratulations, interview requests. But above it all, what haunted me most was the image of my mother unraveling in court, screaming, "It should have all been mine." Naomi set a cup of hot tea in front of me. Madeline, we're at a crossroads. What will you do next? I tightened my grip around the cup, looked straight at her. We won't sell. We'll find a way to partner. But MediLink's ownership must remain ours. This isn't just a company. It's our soul. Naomi smiled, her eyes glowing. I always knew you'd choose that. I leaned back, exhaled deeply, and for the first time, I felt I had stepped out of the shadow that had bound me my whole life. The final ruling came on an early summer morning. I sat in the courtroom, my palms slick with sweat. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the whole world was holding its breath. The judge read slowly. This court recognizes the founding rights and legal ownership of MediLink belong to Madeline Parker. All prior contracts orchestrated by Victoria Parker with a minor are void. Mrs. Victoria Parker is held accountable for forgery and fraud. The words thundered in my mind. I heard Naomi quietly sob beside me, while I sat frozen for a few seconds before finally breathing hard. I had won. Not just a case, but a war spanning years of denial and control. I turned and saw my mother in the opposite row. She was ashen, her eyes like bottomless pits. When the judge struck the gavel, ending the session, she leapt up, her voice breaking. You don't understand. I sacrificed my whole life for her. Without me, she would have never. But her words dissolved into nothing, drowned by the noise of the courtroom. Hannah placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her, But I could see it. The faith in her eyes was gone. Outside in the hallway, reporters surged again, flashes exploding. I kept it brief. This isn't just my victory. It's a victory for the patients who need Medilink. That night, back at the office, we broke down in tears together. Naomi opened the cheap bottle of wine we'd kept from day one, pouring into paper cups. I raised mine, my voice shaking. To Medilink, to the days we thought we wouldn't survive. Everyone laughed through tears. For the first time I felt like I truly belonged to a family, the one I chose. In the weeks that followed, everything changed at dizzying speed. PharMedica returned with a new proposal, not an outright buyout but a strategic partnership. $500 million for usage rights, while Medilink retained core ownership and control. It was exactly what I wanted. Global resources without losing the company's soul. When I signed the new contract, I looked at Naomi and said, "This is a turning point. But we can't forget why we started." She smiled, nodding. "We started for the patients and we'll always be for them." With the new capital, Medilink expanded quickly. Our shabby office was replaced with a bright 3-story headquarters in downtown Boston. From a team of 5, we grew to include engineers, medical advisors, and legal specialists. Every day I walked through those wide glass doors, seeing the Medilink logo shining, my chest swelled with indescribable emotion. But success brought not only glory. It carried relentless challenges. Packed schedules, media pressure, investors lining up. I had to learn to lead, to manage. Some nights, I sat alone in my office, gazing at the lit streets below, wondering if I was losing the simplicity of the beginning. Meanwhile, my family changed too. My mother was sentenced to probation for forgery, banned from financial activities for years. She withdrew from society, no longer seen at parties or teacher boards. My father sometimes called, his voice distant. "I'm proud of you, Madeline." I know it's too late to say, but I truly mean it. Each time I went silent. I forgave him partly, but the scar of his long silence would never fade. Hannah was different. She came to Medilink often, first helping with legal reviews, then gradually becoming a steady advisor. One evening after the team had left, she told me, "You know, for the first time I feel my work as a lawyer really matters. I'm not just winning cases for bonuses. I'm helping patients find justice." I looked at her, smiling faintly. "So in the end, you stepped out of Mom's shadow too?" She stayed quiet, then nodded, her eyes carrying both sadness and relief. Day by day, I saw more clearly that winning the lawsuit was only the beginning. The greatest challenge was keeping Medilink true to its mission. I always reminded the team, we must never let Medilink become just a money machine. Every number on the chart is a life. The words weren't just for them, they were for me too. A year later, Medilink had expanded into Europe, successfully connecting thousands of rare patients to clinical trials. One meeting, I received a report. 5,000 patients matched with the right doctors through the platform. I froze, then tears fell in front of the whole team. That night, I stepped onto the office balcony, cool night air brushing my face, gazing at Boston's glittering lights. I remembered nights curled on chairs, times we nearly lost everything, the betrayals that cut deep. And now I was still standing. I knew the road ahead was long, filled with challenges. But unlike before, I wasn't alone. I had Naomi, a team that believed, and surprisingly, Hannah's support too. I smiled and whispered to myself. Mom wanted to turn me into someone invisible. But it was in that very darkness that I learned how to shine in my own way. If you believe justice always comes, hit subscribe because my journey proves it. I still remember that morning vividly. A crisp autumn morning when the sun spread golden light across the streets of Boston. Our Medilink office was nothing like it had been in the early days, when it was just a cramped little room filled with papers and old computers. Now, the 3-story building glowed with wide glass windows, reflecting the long road I had walked. I arrived earlier than everyone else. Sitting in my office, I looked around at the large space covered with charts, diagrams, and reports. But on my desk I still kept one old thing. The scratched laptop that had stayed with me through college, back when I was fumbling with my first idea of a platform that could connect patients. I touched it lightly, as if touching a memory that never faded. The door creaked open. Naomi walked in with her familiar smile, still clinging to that antique laptop. She teased. I laughed. It reminds me how far we've come. Without those struggling days, there would be no Medilink today. Naomi pulled up a chair beside me, her eyes turning serious. Madeline, have you ever thought about taking a break? You've carried so much these past years. Medilink has a strong team now. I felt her genuine worry, but I shook my head. Maybe someday. But right now there's still work I have to do. Not just for Medilink, but for patients who haven't had a chance to be heard. Naomi smiled softly, said nothing more, and placed her warm hand on my shoulder. That afternoon, I attended a small gathering organized by the city to honor entrepreneurs who contributed to the community. In the old hall, when my name was called, the room erupted in applause. My heart pounded as I walked up the stage. But instead of speaking about revenue or market value, I chose to share the story of a little boy from Ohio who, thanks to Medilink, was admitted into a trial program and was now recovering well. As I spoke, I noticed a few people wiping their eyes. I ended with these words: "Success is not measured by the money we earn, but by the lives we touch." Stepping down from the stage, I caught Hannah's eyes in the audience. She nodded, her smile brimming with pride. One evening, Hannah came over to my house. We sat in the kitchen with hot tea. The air was warm and calm, so different from the days we clashed bitterly in the courtroom. "Do you ever think Mom will change?" Hannah asked gently. I paused before answering. "I don't know. Maybe she'll never accept the fact that I chose my own path. But I no longer expect that. I only hope that one day she can see the true value in what I've done." Hannah sighed. I once stood by her side because I thought family meant always being on the same side. But after everything, I've realized real family isn't just about blood. It's about people who respect each other. Her words stung my eyes with tears. I realized that from the ruins, we were rebuilding our own bond. Time passed, and Medilink kept growing. We opened a branch in California, then partnered with major hospitals around the world. I often flew back and forth, sometimes so exhausted I collapsed on the plane seat. But whenever I thought of the faces of patients who had been saved, I found strength again. One day, I was invited back to my old university to speak at commencement. Standing before hundreds of young graduates full of hope, I shared my journey. From the girl denied by her mother, once living in a shabby apartment, to founding a company that changed thousands of lives. I told them, never let anyone define your worth. If the family's door closes, build a new door for yourself. The applause thundered. I saw in their eyes the belief that they too could rise from loss. Even with a hectic schedule, I kept the habit of visiting a nearby nursing home every weekend. There I spent time with elderly people, many of them without family. I told them about Medilink and Little Hopes. In return, they told me old stories from their youth. Those afternoons gave me balance, as if I was living fully for both the present and the past. One elderly woman once said to me, "You know, sometimes our blood family is the one that hurts us the most. But we can still find family in the arms of strangers, as long as there is kindness." Her words stayed with me, a mirror of my own journey. One winter morning, I went to the cemetery where my grandfather rested. In my hand was a bouquet of white roses. I stood still for a long time before the stone engraved with his name. "Grandpa, I did it. Medilink has become real. I wish you could see." The cold wind blew by, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil. I almost felt as if I heard his gentle laugh. encouraging me to keep moving forward. On New Year's Eve, when fireworks exploded over Boston, I stood on the office rooftop with the whole team. Everyone was cheering, hugging, eyes glowing with pride. I looked around and saw clearly. They were not just colleagues, they were the family fate had given me. I told myself, this journey doesn't end with a single moment of glory. It continues with new challenges and new responsibilities. I had learned how to turn pain into strength, denial into drive, and loneliness into a resilient community. Most importantly, I understood this. I no longer needed to search for a place in the hearts of those who denied me. I had found my place in this world, built with my own hands and unwavering belief. Dear friends, by now I'm sure each of you has your own emotions. Some may think family bonds are more fragile than we imagine, while others may see the extraordinary strength of a woman who dared to rise from rejection to build her own life. I would truly love to hear your thoughts. If you were in my place, would you choose to endure in silence, or would you step out bravely to create a new path? Please share your reflections in the comments, because every story and every perspective is a precious piece that helps us better understand family, resilience, and the true meaning of love. And if you'd like to continue walking alongside me to hear more stories about life, about tragedies, and about the moments of rebirth within families, don't forget to follow the channel. Because ahead, there are still many stories that will touch the heart, stories that may stay with you long after the screen goes dark.